With Michael Poisel, the executive director of PCI Ventures at Penn. And it happens to be a great day to be doing the interview with Michael because one of your companies was featured on CNN today. So Michael, let's start right there. What's the story?
Yes, so our company Ghost Robotics did a joint military exercise with the Air Force and some of the other agencies to demonstrate their dog ability to work with the soldiers to scout out prior to soldiers putting themselves in harm's way. And by all accounts, I think the exercise went extremely well. So we're very proud of the Ghost Robotics team.
So Michael, we were talking earlier, and PCI Ventures is really, it's really the engine that is generating the companies that are fueling the Philadelphia cluster. So we want to spend some time with you to talk about that, but how in the world did you get to this position?
So I was part of New Spring Capital prior to coming to Penn and wanted to do something very early stage and came to the university with that in mind and an opportunity to work with cutting edge technology and helping them to build companies around their research.
So how does PCI Ventures fit into the equation and the Penn Center for Innovation? How does that all work? And tell us about how you're creating companies that are coming out of the Penn ecosystem.
Yes, we're a team within the Penn Center for Innovation, PCI, that reports up through the Vice Provost of Research. And I work with our licensing officers and other people at PCI to find interesting technologies where we have faculty that want to see that turned into a company.
So you talked a little bit about that pipeline. Say more. How do you discover those companies? How do they discover you? How do they get in? And you know, who are the likely folks that you're going to be working with?
We have our faculty that are doing basic research on grants, and when they discover something, they disclose it to our office at the Penn Center of Innovation. They have a relationship with what we call a licensing officer. The acronym we use is a TLO. And the TLO works with them to decide whether the university is going to patent the technology. And if we decide to do so, then we need to have a commercialization strategy. And oftentimes that commercialization strategy can involve starting a company around the research to get more applied research dollars behind the project. Many of these patents are very early stage in their development and they need applied research dollars to be able to get there. And one of the few ways that exists to be able to do that is through working with a startup company. Really, it's either working with a large corporate entity or working with a startup. And there's so many fewer research staffs at large companies doing early stage research today that starting a company is a much more viable opportunity in order to get some money behind it and do that research that needs to happen so we can decide is there a commercial opportunity or not.
So you guys really get in and dig in deep. I mean, you're part search firm, part capitalization firm, part. Let's talk about let's get into the weeds a little bit and all the services and support that you provide the companies that are in your ecosystem.
Yes, we actually work with the faculty to form the entity. We form Delaware LLCs. We then work with them to do all of the background legal work that needs to be done. It's all boilerplated type activity and putting that all together, helping them to register for government grants that they may want to apply for as a company entity. And then, as you said, you know, we take on the responsibility of finding a CEO to run the company. And so there is a large portion of my job that's as a search firm, trying to match the right person to the right project in order to build a company around them. The management team is so important and critical to the development of the business that puts a lot of pressure on us to get that right. And we pride ourselves in matching the right people to the right projects. Once that entrepreneur is involved, we then work with them to start building the business.
So how do you determine which discoveries, which faculty members, what kind of filters, what's your criteria for determining what's going to be successful? I'm sure at this point you've got a really good eye for what's going to make it and what's not.
I actually will always claim that I don't. I really would prefer to let the market tell us whether this is an opportunity or not. I don't pretend to have the hubris to believe that I can predict. I have lots of stories in my background over 10 years of doing this at Penn of ideas that to me look dubious upon first view and turned out to have lots of money put behind them and significant resources put to the project. So I don't want to ever claim that I can tell and know, especially at this early stage. And it's very important to us to allow the market to decide. So there is no stealth business for us. We don't the old 90s, 2000s idea of building a stealth business and not telling the market what you were doing. We're very active in getting out there and talking to people about those ideas. The one example I give, one of our biggest successes, I hired an entrepreneur, brought him onto the team and told him that we needed to make sure that there was something here and we needed him to go out to the marketplace and talk about this idea. And he came back after talking to a whole bunch of pharma companies and said, well, very interestingly, I have a company that wants to buy us. And I'm like, we're just getting started. You can't imagine somebody wants to buy us already. And he said, actually, I think they do. And it took us 9 months to a year to get the transaction completed. But they did buy the company, and it was absolutely amazing. And so he worked for us for, I think it was total 17 months and came away very successful. And our faculty entrepreneur made a ton of money.
So Michael, you have a story to tell about the creation of Pennovation and how that all came to be. And I thought it was a marvelous story. I would love you to share it.
Sure. So we were doing this for 4 or 5 years of creating companies. And one of my challenges was that the companies had nowhere to reside. They had to operate virtually out of people's homes. They couldn't necessarily afford real estate at that point. So by chance, an individual in our real estate group by the name of Paul Sainert, Paul came around to our office and said that Penn had bought a plot of land just south of campus and he'd love to give tours. And myself and my partner at the time, Heather Steinman, who was helping me build the program, she was very enthusiastic, said we should take a tour. Let's go with Paul. So we did. We got in his car and drove down to the site, which was an old DuPont paint factory. And he walked us around to the buildings, which were all abandoned. I mean, sort of apocalyptic. I mean, there was just, it looked like people left on a Friday and were going to come back on Monday and never did. But we looked at one of the buildings and we turned to Paul and said, can we have that building? And he was like, you've got to be kidding. Why would anybody want an abandoned building? We said, well, we've got all these little companies that just need a place to squat. And there's desks in there, there's chairs in there. They could easily do this. And Paul said, sure, why not? And so we moved our companies, started moving companies in, and they lasted about 6 months before they realized the heat didn't really work. The electricity was spotty. There was no cell coverage. It didn't work. And squatting in an abandoned building is not a good idea. But Paul, to his credit, took that idea and pushed it through the administration and said, we should do this. We should build an incubator. And I give him so much of the credit. They formed a team. We all worked on the idea together, under his leadership. And it took us probably about 2 years to get it all together. But Penn allocated the money to build the incubator and really to renovate the whole Pennovation Works site with this in mind of building a commercialization campus. And so I give him a lot of credit for the genesis, and I wish he was here today to see it through.
Yeah. Well, Michael, as we start to wrap up and you look ahead, what's ahead over the next 6 months to 3 years for PCI Ventures? What's the new mountain to climb? What's the next mountain to climb?
So we're making some changes to the programs to make them more faculty friendly. We're going to assure the faculty that they can own as much of these companies as possible under the Penn patent policy. And I think that will be exciting as that comes to fruition. And then also, when you look at the Pennovation Works campus, which we're a part of, and a participant. We started with the Pennovation Center, renovated that building. We renovated an office building across the parking lot. And now coming in December, we're going to be opening our third building, which will be our lab building. And it's almost entirely a biological lab building, which is something so needed, not just at Penn, but across Philadelphia. There's not enough of those real estate resources here in the city. And so I think everyone will find that it'll be an attractive lease opportunity to bring tenants into that building. And I'm very hopeful that we're going to have it full very soon after it opens. And so I'm excited about that. And for the further growth of the Pennovation Works campus, whether it's our young company buildings to the Working Dog Center and some of the other small companies that exist on the site, we're very excited about the future for Pennovation Works.
Well, that's awesome. Michael, you really are the engine that's making it happen here in Philadelphia, and we really appreciate everything you're doing. Thanks for spending time with us this morning. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Joe. I really appreciate the opportunity.